Find more questions and study at your own pace on our website. The link will be in the description. Let's get started. Question 1. A developer is storing sensitive data generated by an application in Amazon S3. The developer wants to encrypt the data at rest. A company policy requires an audit trail of when the AWS Key Management Service key was used and by whom. Which encryption option will meet these requirements? Option A, server-side encryption with Amazon S3 managed keys. Option B, server-side encryption with AWS KMS managed keys. Option C, server-side encryption with customer-provided keys. Option D, server-side encryption with self-managed keys. The answer is option B. Server-side encryption with AWS KMS managed keys will meet the requirements because it encrypts the data at rest and integrates seamlessly with AWS Key Management Service. SSE KMS provides an audit trail by logging the use of the encryption keys in AWS CloudTrail. This ensures that the company policy requirement of tracking when the KMS key was used and by whom is fulfilled. Question 2. A company uses an AWS Lambda function that reads messages from an Amazon Simple Queue Service standard queue. The Lambda function makes an HTTP call to a third-party API for each message. The company wants to ensure that the Lambda function does not overwhelm the third-party API with more than 2 concurrent requests. Which solution will meet these requirements? Option A. Configure a provision concurrency of 2 on the Lambda function. Option B. Configure a batch size of 2 on the Amazon SQS event source mapping for the Lambda function. Option C. Configure Lambda event filtering to process 2 messages from Amazon SQS at every invocations. Option D. Configure a maximum concurrency of 2 on the Amazon SQS event source mapping for the Lambda function. The answer is option D. To ensure that the Lambda function does not overwhelm the third-party API with more than 2 concurrent requests, you should configure a maximum concurrency of 2 on the Amazon SQS event source mapping for the Lambda function. This setting directly controls the number of concurrent executions of the Lambda function, thereby ensuring that no more than 2 requests are processed concurrently. Question 3. A developer has written code for an application and wants to share it with other developers on the team to receive feedback. The shared application code needs to be stored long-term with multiple versions and batch change tracking. Which AWS service should the developer use? Option A, AWS Code Build. Option B, Amazon S3. Option C, AWS Code Commit. Option D, AWS Cloud9. The answer is option C. AWS Code Commit is a fully managed source control service that allows developers to store their code securely in the cloud. It supports long-term storage, version control, and tracking changes, making it ideal for teams to collaborate and manage different versions of their projects. Question 4. A developer needs to build an AWS CloudFormation template that self-populates the AWS region variable that deploys the CloudFormation template. What is the most operationally efficient way to determine the region in which the template is being deployed? Option A. Use the AWS region pseudo-parameter. Option B. Require the region as a CloudFormation parameter. Option C. Find the region from the AWS, your stacked pseudo-parameter by using the FN, or split intrinsic function. Option D. Dynamically import the region by referencing the relevant parameter in AWS Systems Manager Parameter Store. The answer is option A. The AWS region pseudo-parameter is a built-in parameter in AWS CloudFormation that automatically resolves to the AWS region where the CloudFormation stack is being created. Using this parameter is the most operationally efficient way to determine the region because it requires no additional input or configuration, ensuring simplicity and reducing the potential for human error. Question 5. A developer is building an event-driven application by using AWS Lambda and Amazon EventBridge. The Lambda function needs to push events to an EventBridge event bus. The developer uses an SDK to run the put events EventBridge action and specifies no credentials in the code. After deploying the Lambda function, the developer notices that the function is failing and there are access denied exception errors in the logs. How should the developer resolve this issue? Option A. Configure a VPC peering connection between the Lambda function and Event Bridge. Option B. Modify their AWS credentials to include permissions for the put events Event Bridge action. Option C. Modify the Lambda function execution role to include permissions for the put events Event Bridge action. Option D. Add a resource-based policy to the Lambda function to include permissions for the put events Event Bridge action. The answer is option C. To allow the Lambda function to interact with other AWS services, such as Event Bridge, it must have the appropriate permissions. These permissions are usually granted via the execution role associated with the Lambda function. By modifying the Lambda function's execution role to include permissions for the put events Event Bridge action, the function will be authorized to push events to the Event Bridge event bus, thus resolving the access denied exception errors. That's all for today's video. Don't forget to check out our website where you can find more questions for this exam. The link will be in the description. Thank you for watching and good luck on your exams.